I call this special meeting of the Carrollton-Farmers Branch Independent School District Board of Trustees to order at 6 o'clock p.m. on August 24th, 2017. Please join me in standing as Randy Shackman leads the board's opening prayer, and remain standing as Tara Herbachik leads the board Pledge of Allegiance, and as Richard Fleming leads the pledge to the Texas flag. Andy?
I invite you to pray with me. Father, we are grateful for the opportunity to be of service to our schools, to our school children, to our staff, faculty, and all that are involved in this school district, and we ask your blessings to be on this board tonight as we deliberate on the coming year's budget. We're thankful for all the work that's gone into this process. Lord, we're thankful for the great start that's happening in our district, and we look forward to students being in our buildings and in our schools this coming week. Again, we would ask blessings upon all of that process, and may truly we accomplish our goals of high achievement for each student. Thank you, Father, for being in our midst, and bless us this night. In Jesus' name, amen.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Thank you. As a district, we dedicate all our efforts and resources to our goal of high achievement for each student. The board uses this goal to guide all deliberations, decisions, and actions. You will get to see all deliberations, decisions, and actions of the board in open session, with the exception of some items which may be discussed in a closed session as stipulated in the Texas Government Code, Section 551, commonly known as the Open Meetings Act. These items typically deal with personnel matters, consultation with our attorney, and real estate. For the record, all board members are present. We constitute a quorum and may conduct business on behalf of the district. As required by Board Policy BBD Local, let the minutes reflect that all board members have met or exceeded the number of continuing education training hours required for 2016. Ladies and gentlemen, before moving on to the next agenda item, I would like to point out that we have an agenda item during which the board encourages comments from citizens of the district and from district employees. That agenda item is number 4. Public meeting to discuss 2017-2018 budget and proposed tax rate. Anyone wishing to speak, either as an individual or as a representative of a group, may do so during agenda item number 4. Please submit your request to do so on one of the forms provided on the table just outside the boardroom door. And you may place the completed form in the box provided on that table, or present your completed form to Administrative Assistant Ms. Sharon Scrivener. When the board addresses agenda item number 4, public meeting to discuss 2017-2018 budget and proposed tax rate, and following the presentation by administration, you will be invited to the podium to speak to the board. We will now proceed with agenda item number 2. Dr. Burns.
Thank you, Mr. Matthews. Members of the board, as you're aware, one of the things that you do in adopting a new budget is make sure that the old budget is everything in order. And tonight, I'm going to turn it over to our Chief Financial Officer, Scott Roderick, to talk to you a little bit about the 16-17 budget first. Mr. Roderick.
Thank you. We have provided a detail of the budget amendment in your booklet behind tab number 2. Each year in August, we look at each functional category and determine if we need to add funds to provide reserves that will cover any unforeseen journal entries or accruals that may occur after year end. This helps us to avoid a potential compliance issue with our external auditors if we were to exceed expenditures over appropriations in a functional category. In 2015-16, the district committed $7.5 million of unassigned fund balance for technology capital replacement. For 16-17, the district would like to move forward with transferring out $4 million into a special revenue fund. This budget amendment reflects a transfer out of the general fund. This would allow the district the ability to begin the process of developing a plan to address prior identified needs, such as an upgrade to district-wide phone system or other technology-related capital assets. The operating transfer out does not give authorization for any purchases. As the greatest needs are identified, these items will be brought back to the Board of Trustees for your approval. As we look at the detailed items in item number 2, you can see for the general fund, the sheet that has the local revenues, the state revenues, and federal revenues, you can see our proposed budget amendment of $30,000. That would increase our total revenues for our 16-17 budget to $256 million. And you can see we are increasing our Function 23 expenditures by $25,000, and in Function 32 are to $5,000. That would bring our total expenditures for the 16-17 budget to a little over $256 million. You can also see the operating transfer out I just mentioned of $4 million as other uses, and that would come out of our fund balance for 16-17. On the next page, you can see we do not have any final budget amendments for our food service fund. Our total revenues there are going to be about $12.6 million. Our total budget will be $12.6 million. Our expenditure budget for our food service is $13 million. We have a deficit there because our food service department has developed a plan to try to eliminate they've reached their maximum fund balance that's allowed in our food service fund, and so they have developed a plan to spend down that fund balance. And for our debt service fund, we do not have any final budget amendments for 16-17. You can see our amended budget is $40 million for our revenues, $40.7 million for our expenditures, and we've had other sources and other uses because of debt refunding that we did in the late 2016. And the next page just lists all of our budget amendments that we've approved throughout the 16-17 year. You can see on the final page on budget amendment number 15 is the operating transfer out to the new special revenue fund. And then budget amendment number 16 would be the increases to Function 23, 32, and to our federal revenues. And so with that, the administration recommends the approval of the 16-17 final budget amendment.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen of the board, is there a motion? Mr. Fleming.
Make a motion that we consider approval of the 2016-2017 final budget amendment for the CFB ISD.
I have a motion from Mr. Fleming. Do I have a second? I have a second from Mr. Ramos. Do we have any discussion on the matter?
Mr. Matthews, one quick question. Mr. Roderick, where are we going to, it's a good idea to go ahead and pull out the $4 million and start moving forward the technology. Where are we going to hold those funds in, it's coming out of the fund balance. So where do we put those while we're waiting for that process?
We have it in our text pool account. We'll create a text pool account that'll hold that money, the $4 million. It'll gain some interest, and then it'll just sit in that like an investment account until we bring back to the board a proposal on how we should move forward with those funds.
Great. So it will be a separate account.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, totally
Excellent.
separate.
Thank you.
And Mr. Shackman, also for reporting purposes on our financial statements, you'll then see it in a special revenue fund balance. So it'll still be reported accordingly.
Any other questions, board members? All those in favor, raise your hand. Any opposed? With a vote of 7 in favor and none opposed, the motion carries. Our next agenda item is number 3. Dr. Burns?
Thank you, Mr. Matthews. And members of the board, I'm going to turn it again over to our Chief Financial Officer, Mr. Roderick.
The Government Accounting Standard Board, or GASB, adopted in 2010 Statement Number 54, or GASB 54. Part of our yearly financial reporting practices include evaluating our fund balance categories and determining if we want to identify any commitments or unassigned fund balance. for the 2016-17 fiscal year will be the 7th year of the implementation of GASB 54. Committed categories are require board authorization. We are proposing 4 categories: building construction, repair and maintenance, technology capital replacement, transportation upgrades, and campus activity funds. The board authorizes the categories through a resolution, and management will determine the amounts at year end. We have concluded an estimate of the proposed commitment amounts. Before any of the funds could be actually spent in these categories, it would require board approval through a budget amendment, with the exception of the campus activity funds, which are in a special revenue fund. The administration recommends the approval of the GASB 54 resolution.
Board members, is there a motion to be made at this time? Ms. Klein?
Go ahead, Nancy.
I'd like to make a motion to adopt the resolution to classify a portion of the fund balances per the Governmental Accounting Standards Board, GASB 54.
I have a motion from Ms. Klein. Do I have a second? Mr. Shackman? Any discussion, board members? All those in favor, raise your hand. With the vote of 7 in favor and none against, the motion carries. As established in Texas Education Codes 44.002 through 44.006, the process to adopt the annual budget and tax rate for Texas public school districts includes a lawfully posted public meeting during which our constituents may participate. Anyone wishing to speak, either as an individual or as a representative of a group, may, during administration's presentation, submit your request to do so on one of the forms provided on the table just outside the board. As I mentioned earlier, you may leave the form out there, or you may present it to Administrative Assistant Ms. Scrivener. Following the presentation, you will be invited to the podium to speak to the board according to the forms received. Comments should pertain to the 2017-2018 budget and proposed tax rate and be no longer than 3 minutes. Our timekeeper, Ms. Klein, will provide a hand signal as the end of your time, as your 3 minutes approaches. Now, Dr. Burns, I understand you and Ms. Tillman would like to begin with some words and a short presentation before we open the floor to comments from our audience.
Yes, yes, thank you, Mr. Matthews. And members of the board, and even to our new members, remember that we start working on the budget last year when we finished the old budget, right? That's how the budget works. So when you adopted this year's budget, we were working on next year's budget. Same here. We begin that process way in advance, try to keep you abreast of things that are happening. This year, obviously, being a legislative year, there were a lot of issues, but we want to keep you up to date as how things go with the budget, so that when you get to this point, we hope you're well informed on the mechanics as well as the contents that are in our budget. But we do think it's always important for our community to see the budget as it will be presented tonight, so they also can understand how the budget process works in CFB. So those are my comments. I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Tillman.
Thank you. We are happy to give you our final presentation this evening of our 17-18 budget. There's no additional new information that we haven't presented to you in the past, but we just want to remind you, so we're going to go through this information fairly quickly. Since we last met, the legislative special session did end with the result of 0 additional dollars that will be going to CFB. So we're not happy with the results of the session, but we weren't expecting anything major coming out of that session. We are happy with what we've been able to accomplish with our 17-18 budget in terms of moving our compensation plan forward and moving to where we want to be with our teacher salaries, as well as making some additional programmatic additions. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Roderick to start us off this evening.
The district is legally required to adopt 3 budgets. The first required fund to adopt is the general fund. Like Ms. Tillman said, these numbers haven't changed since our last presentation. Just in brief, our local revenues is set to increase $15.3 million. Our state revenue is set to decrease $7.9 million. We'll have an increase in our Chapter 41 recapture payment of $3.5 million, and our TIF payment will increase $3.1 million. This slide shows us our formula funding template. This has our 15-16, 16-17, and 17-18. We want to draw your attention to line 39, the local fund assignment. This is the fund that is, this line in 15-16, it was $143.2 million. This is the amount that was responsible for of local dollars. And in 16-17, it increased to 154.1, and in 17-18, it's $164.6 million. This is due to our increase in our appraised values. On the next line down, on line 40, the state share of Tier 1, you can see in 15-16, the state share was $32.2 million, and in 16-17, it was 19.3, and in 17-18, it's projected to be a little over $7.1 million. On the general fund, on the expenditure side, there are major factors are the payroll adjustments. This will cost about $5.2 million. And the other major categories or major increases is the recapture payment increasing $3.5 million, and our TIF payment increasing $3.1 million. From 16-17, we adopted a balanced budget. Our total resource and our total uses totaled $255.9 million. The proposed budget for 17-18 for our total sources is $263.3 million. Our total uses will be $263.3 million for a balanced budget for 17-18. The next required fund that we were required to adopt a budget for is the debt service. In 16-17, our total uses and our total sources totaled $40.3 million for a balanced budget. In 17-18, our total sources will be $41.2 million. Our total uses will be $41.2. That's an increase of $851,000, or approximately 2.1%. And the last fund that we will adopt a budget for is the food service fund. And for 16-17, our total uses and our total sources equaled. They were $12.6 million. For 17-18, we are proposing total resources of $13.1 million. Our total uses of $13.1. That's an increase of $452,000, or a little over 3.5%. The food service fund is the only self-sustaining fund we have. This is the only fund where our non-payroll expenditures exceed our payroll.
We're going to shift gears now and talk about our tax rate. Our proposed tax rate for 17-18 is the maintenance and operation tax rate of 1.17, interest and sinking fund, which is utilized to pay for our debt service payments, 0.211, for a total tax rate of 1.381, as compared to the prior year of 1.3917, just over a penny reduction in the tax rate. This is just to show you a historical look of the tax rate for CFB, going all the way back to 05-06, where you can see our rate was $1.825 as compared to $1.3810 today. 06, 07, 07, 08 were the years where the state required the district to compress our M&O tax rate, so that's where you can see the dip, whereby over a 2-year period we were required to go from $1.50 to $1. And then the board had the option to add 4 pennies back, which we did, and so we've been at that $1.04 up until this year, where we're at the $1.17. In looking at districts in our area, we wanted to look at their rates. These are unofficial rates. Some districts have had their meetings and adopted their rates, some have not. You can see where the second to the left bar was still maintaining one of the lowest rates in the area. Everyone to the right does have a higher tax rate than CFB. Some of those have held a TRE, and some of those have not held a TRE and still have a tax rate higher than us. That's a product of the district not having a new bond issue since 2003, with these districts holding multiple bond issues over that time period. This is a comparison of our proposed levy with last year's levy on an average residence. So last year, our average residence taxable value was $187,000. This year, that's going up to just over $204,000. So if you apply our proposed tax rate, the tax increase would be approximately $223 or $18 a month. In adopting this rate, we do have to use specific statutory language. The law requires that we calculate what's called an effective tax rate. That is a rate that will yield the same amount of tax revenue in both years if applied to the same property. It does not take into consideration how state funding works for districts. So for cities, when they calculate this, it truly is what will generate the same amount of revenue. For us, it's not generating the same amount of total revenue because of our loss from the state side. So it's really misleading, but we're still required to follow the same guidelines and look and calculate an effective tax rate. Then if we're adopting a rate above that effective tax rate, we have to use this specific statutory language that says we're increasing our tax rate even though we're decreasing it. In addition to the confusing language, we also have to include in our resolution and also post on our website specific language stating that this tax rate will raise more taxes for maintenance and operation than last year's tax rates. We do have that on our website and included in our resolution. So this evening, just to summarize what our intent is, this item will establish the public meeting and meet the requirements of the law. We'll then be asking for the board to consider adopting the budget as presented and then finally adopting the tax rate. This concludes our portion of the presentation this evening.
Thank you, Ms. Tillman. At this time, the board will entertain questions and comments regarding the proposed budget and tax rate from the floor. As explained earlier before the presentation, interested individuals who have submitted request to speak forms will be called to the podium. Ms. Scrivener, have you received any forms indicating interested speakers?
No, sir. We had one presented, but it was withdrawn, so we haven't.
Okay. Therefore, we will move on. So there are no other members of the audience who would like to speak, form or no form. Okay, hearing none, seeing none, we will proceed to agenda item number 5. Dr. Burns?
I kind of had a question.
Oh, I'm sorry, ma'am.
Mr.
Yes,
Roderick, could you go back to the slide that shows the state's contribution that you highlighted, I think in green? Yeah. So what I understand is as our appraisals rise for our homes, because the market is kind of on fire, that the additional funds that the district is collecting is offset by a reduction in the state funds that are being provided?
Yes.
That is correct. When you look at the our share, it's directly going to increase with our value, and the state gets to decrease the amount they're providing. In looking at 17-18, if you look at our total state revenue, it has dropped to just over 12%. If you go back 5 years, we were much higher, like in the 26 to 27% range, and that's a direct result of how the funding formula works, and that the state benefits significantly from the property value growth.
And then this legislative session, what was provided for funding is actually for some of the high-growth districts, which we are not high-growth. And who else received funding that came from the special session? Do you know?
They did approve some facility funding for charters, as well as increasing the existing debt allotment that goes to help provide support for debt payments for property poor districts. We're not eligible for that right now based on our property wealth. And they are also have provided some relief for districts who were receiving available state aid from
Is that
tax reduction.
acetar?
Yes,
Sounds like some sort of science fiction creature.
it is. But the way the bill was written, TEAs, they're having trouble interpreting how they're going to allocate those funds, so we don't know yet who's going to benefit from that. But we are not an acetar district, so we aren't eligible for any of those funds.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments, board members?
For budget, I mean, I have questions on some of the details.
Well, go ahead.
All right. Down on, let's see, in the quick look, I guess it's page 17 on general fund. In reviewing some of the details, I just wanted to get some explanation or clarification to understand some of the significant increases and decreases there. The first one specifically in number 91, the contracted instructional services. The description says that that includes attendance waivers. Is that?
That's our Chapter 41 payment.
It is the Chapter 41 payment?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
And if you want to, I'm sure you have a question on Function 11, the very first item. Yes.
I don't understand with that and the staff numbers and the other pages. And then
Right.
with the pay increase.
So with the TRE, if you'll recall, we did have a piece reserved for technology that we held on to until the TRE passed. So we had that $3 million that was contingent upon the passing of the TRE, along with the $3 million that had been budgeted. They were all in Function 11. So this year, technology only has $500,000 in the original budget. All of the rest of that was utilized to pay district-wide raises, so that $6 million was effectively spread out over the functions. And so that's why you're seeing a decrease in 11, is because that $3 million was sitting there. We used it for technology, but now it's spread out, and the majority of the remainder of the increases are all related to the 4% or the 3% raise.
Okay, so that would include the function of the 23 school leadership, same thing?
Yes. On 23, we also added days to our assistant principals to provide some additional support and be ready for the school year, and we added additional days to our secretaries. So that's all in Function 23. But other than that, it is a result of the raise. A lot of 23 has our support staff, which was at the 4% versus the 3%.
Okay. And in the full, I guess, budget book, the 200 and some odd pages,
Yes, ma'am.
will there be similar data as last year as far as the student data breakdown and the student numbers? I see it on page 33 in the quick book from the enrollment and economically disadvantaged, but I had found a chart in that other book that had special ed, all the different classifications of instructions.
Yes, as soon as we leave this meeting in the morning, Mr. Roderick will begin the task of putting together this book. So that's next on his to-do list.
Okay. And then one more, sorry. So on page 27 in the quick look, the staff data, it has the total personnel, full-time staff counts, and I see that the source says Texas Education Agency standard reports, and I assume that's a report we submit to the TEA?
Yes.
So is there any, or y'all clarify to me, it says teachers, administrators, and support staff, educational aides, auxiliary staff, but is there a way to tie those classifications back to the functions on the function codes on the other, like the 11, the 23, or are they all mixed in together?
These are all mixed in. It would take
Okay.
quite a bit, but we can look at some other ways if you're wanting to see staff by function. We can certainly put something
I think I was
together.
just trying to look at the dollars associated with those functions and then looking at the staff counts, and I think that would clarify some, but I'm not asking for that.
Okay.
I just wanted to make sure that there was no correlation between
correlation.
those
There's
and
not.
those functions.
No, there's really not.
Okay. That's it for me.
Thank you.
Yes.
Any other questions, comments, board members?
Quick question.
Yes.
On the food service budget,
Yes.
it's not a very large increase. Percent-wise, it's a little larger than the debt service, but we have declining student population and increase. Is that increase coming there because things cost more? What's the, we're
Yeah.
feeding fewer people, so
Yeah, we've seen in the past years that, commodity prices have gone up, prices of food. We're not seeing a lot of inflation in the U.S., but, certain items are increasing in cost.
And our food service workers also received a 4% pay increase as well.
And so that's part, okay, so it's plugged in there.
Right. And as Mr. Shackman, as you know, and members of the board, we're trying to keep the cost down to our students, so.
Right, no, I understand that, yeah, trying to keep that down, but that does reflect the payroll costs in there as well.
Yes.
Yes.
Good, okay.
Any other questions, comments, board members? Okay, hearing none, seeing none, we will proceed now to our next agenda item, number 5. Dr. Burns?
Thank you, Mr. Matthews. Well, board members, this is the fun part. Okay, this is the fun part. So, Ms. Tillman?
Yes, in your packets behind tab 5, you've received a copy of the resolution to adopt the budget along with what's considered the official budget. It's the 2017-18 budget that you see in your packet. The resolution reads as follows. Whereas due notice as required by law has been given of a public meeting on the 2017-18 budget for this school district, and whereas said public meeting was held according to law, and whereas the administration and the Board of Trustees have carefully considered the budget for the said 2017-18 school year, and find this budget to be in the best interest of the school district. Whereas, therefore, be it resolved, ordered, and ordained by the Board of Trustees of the Carrollton-Farmers Branch Independent School District that the 2017-2018 budget of the Carrollton-Farmers Branch Independent School District shall be, and the same is hereby in all things adopted and approved as the budget of the Carrollton-Farmers Branch Independent School District for the 2017-18 fiscal year, in the total amount of revenue of $317,709,520 and expenditures of $317,709,520. This evening, we're asking the Board of Trustees to execute the resolution adopting the official 2017-18 budget as presented.
Board members, does anyone have a motion to make regarding adoption of the 2017-18 budget and executing the resolution as presented? Mr. Shackman.
I would make a motion that this board accept the administrative recommendation to adopt the resolution related to the 2017-2018 year budget as presented.
I have a motion from Mr. Shackman. Do I have a second? I have a second from Ms. Robachik. Do we have any discussion? All those in favor, raise your hand. That is 7 votes for, none against. The motion carries. Our next agenda item under board operations. Thank you all. Yeah, if y'all need to go start working now, Scott, go ahead. Our next agenda item under board operations is item number 6. Dr. Burns.
Yes, Mr. Matthews, members of the board. As you heard Ms. Tillman earlier, it is a little confusing at this part, so we're going to try to be very clear when what it means. But it is confusing in what you're about to say versus what you've seen in the report earlier. So, Ms. Tillman?
Yes. The district has met all legal requirements as prescribed in Education Code and Property Tax Code as it relates to adopting a tax rate. The resolution setting the tax rate for 2017 reads as follows. There came to be considered the matter of establishing and setting the tax rate to be levied on all taxable property of record on the 2017 tax rolls, and whereas the Board of Trustees of the Carrollton-Farmers Branch Independent School District has heretofore approved and adopted the 2017-18 budget for this district, on this date, we, the Board of Trustees of the Carrollton-Farmers Branch Independent School District, hereby levy or set the tax rate on a $100 valuation for the district for the tax year 2017 at a total tax rate of 1.381 to be assessed and collected by the duly specified assessor and collector as followed. 1.17 for the purpose of maintenance and operation, 0.211 for the purpose of payment of principal and interest on debts. Such taxes are to be assessed and collected by the tax officials designated by the district. This tax will raise more taxes for maintenance and operation than last year's tax rate. Each of you have a copy of the motion language that we are required to utilize. It's the last tab in your booklet. There's a 6A and a 6B listed on that tab. This is where we have to use the mandatory language in order to adopt the rate, because we are technically adopting a rate higher than our calculated total effective rate, but we do have it on the screen just as a reminder that we are adopting a tax rate lower than the prior year. So we just want to clarify that.
You're asking me how to clarify it?
Exactly.
I defer to Ms. Tillman, thank you.
So the clarification is, again, the effective rate is simply a calculation that we have to follow that doesn't take into consideration all of the elements of our funding mechanisms from the state. So it's simply saying this tax rate that we calculate will produce the same amount of revenue if applied to the same properties in both years. So because values have gone up, then that rate would actually calculate out to be a lower rate that would generate the same amount of taxes if applied to those properties. So then if you adopt a total rate above that calculated effective rate, you have to say the language that you're increasing the rate. And you cannot add or take away from the motion language.
So you lower the rate to raise the tax.
Good.
That's it.
Good.
And we ask for the state to give us a new finance system.
That's exactly right.
Very confusing.
Well,
It
and
is.
As you mentioned, it really applies more to cities.
Yes,
It doesn't really apply to school districts, but, you know, that would require too much common sense.
They didn't adjust the code to properly address school districts. They just left it the same, basically, for all entities.
One thing you may want to watch in the newspapers is Richardson and Capel are modifying what they put in the paper to try to put like an English language version of what's going on.
Okay.
Anything else? Okay, board members, please keep in mind that there is specific statutory language that must be used when adopting a tax rate above the effective rate, and that sample motion language has been provided to each of you, as Ms. Tillman says. Do I hear a motion? Mr. Shackman.
Mr. Matthews, I move that the property tax rate be increased by the adoption of a tax rate of 1.381, which is effectively a 5.36% increase in the tax rate.
I have a motion read by Mr. Shackman. Do I have a second? I have a second by Ms. Klein. Any discussion? All those in favor, raise your hand. That vote is unanimous. Motion carries. Now the board must also approve the resolution to set the tax rate for tax year 2017. The resolution includes specific statutory language required for a tax rate above the effective tax rate. Ms. Tillman will review the resolution with us at this time.
I'm sorry, I did it out of order. I have read the resolution. I'm
That's
sure
what
you
I
don't
was
want to
gonna
hear
say.
it
Didn't we just
again.
hear that? Yes.
I'd be
Yeah.
happy to read it again.
Does anyone need her to read that again? Hearing none, seeing none. Huh? Do I have a motion? Mr. Ramos.
I further move approval of the resolution to set the tax rate for the tax year 2017 as found in item 6 of the board book, setting the tax rate at $1.17 for the purpose of maintenance and operation, and 0.2110 for the purpose of payment of principal and interest on debts.
I have a motion from Mr. Ramos. Do I have a second? I have a second from Ms. Robachick. Any discussion? All those in favor, raise your hand. That vote is unanimous. Motion carries. Any of you have any comments to make at this time? Any board members, any comments? Ms. Robachick.
I just want to thank y'all for your efforts.
I want to second that motion.
Thank you.
Any other comments, board members? Hearing none, seeing none, we have reached the end of our agenda, and we are adjourned at 6:39.